Cool. So Emmett Malloy, I'm the middle child of John and Betsy Malloy, five kids from Los Angeles, dead center LA. And yeah, I'm a film director.
Trailer from the original Netflix documentary Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell. And this is Factual America. We're brought to you by Alamo Pictures, an Austin and London-based production company making documentaries about America for international audiences. I'm your host, Matthew Sherwood. Today we're talking about Christopher Wallace, aka Biggie Smalls, or the Notorious B.I.G., the acclaimed rapper who was tragically murdered at the age of just 24 in a drive-by shooting. Talking to us about the Notorious B.I.G.'s life and his legacy on hip-hop is Emmett Malloy, the Grammy-award-winning director and producer of Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell. Emmett, welcome to Factual America.
Thank you. Great to speak with you. And it's been a minute since I talked about this film, so I feel I'm back excited again. Yeah, okay. I'm back. I got a fresh tank.
Okay, great. I mean, how are things with you there in California?
Yeah, real good. Just kind of, I think like everybody, we're bouncing back a little bit. I got my second vaccine yesterday, so I felt like that was weirdly emotional. And it's kind of feeling like whatever, there's some optimism brewing. Yeah. So I'm certainly a good purveyor of optimism.
Yeah, I agree. I've had one. I'm waiting for the second dose. So
yeah, good.
So you're ahead of me, but yeah, starting to feel. My wife had her second one a few days ago. So yeah. Who knew we'd be a year and a half ago? We'd all be excited about getting vaccinated.
Just insane.
Yeah, it is. So again, the film Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell, dropped on Netflix. I think in March. I think it's been doing quite well, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, it's been a hit for them, which just, for me, has been so exciting because you just, not often do all the planets align. And this one's just had that swirl around it, which has been just so fun to have something you work on for so long, get eyeballs and get people, talking about it.
Well, and I think you've got a great subject, don't you, to help make that happen. I mean, for someone of my age and grew up in the U.S. and yourself included, maybe it's a bit odd to say, to tell people who Notorious B.I.G. was or whatever, but I mean, it's hard to believe. It's been almost 25 years since his tragic death. So maybe you can give us a synopsis, not just who was he, and then also what's this film about?
Well, I think I'll start with what the film is about, because I think the who is he will just come out of that. Yeah. My pitch always, obviously, I was born right about the same time as Christopher Wallace. We're a month apart, both Geminis. So, certainly couldn't be more in line with my arc of life, and just as far as, being part of witnessing him. But I wasn't a huge Biggie guy. I wasn't like, I mean, I knew all the big songs and everything, but I was on the West Coast, and NWA and Dre and Snoop, they were more my flavor. But to be honest, I was listening to the Grateful Dead, that's the upbringing I had musically, to be honest, and punk music. So, my only point was I came to this as a bit of an outsider, more as a filmmaker, somebody interested in great stories with obviously iconic people. If you could ever get those, I'm always in the mood. And music, I've made a lot of music films and are a big part of that tradition of filmmaking. So there was a lot of lanes in for me, but my goal always, when this project became something where the estate said they were making a film, and some friends of mine brought it up and said, would you ever be interested in this? And I was like, yeah, of course. So I pitched my idea, and my idea was simply, is like, I don't feel like anybody's ever stopped and focused on the first 20 years of his life. Every film fast forwards through that and really gets to kind of post Ready to Die, really gets to when he was fully formed as the Notorious B.I.G. and really quickly to the Tupac
Yeah.
saga. And that just felt odd to me. And that's where I began digging. And then, that was my idea. I want to make a film about that celebrates his life. And that got me in the door and got me to, a lunch with Miss Wallace. And from there, I was able to get a lot more of the exciting elements I was able to build my film around.
Did the estate approach you? How did that
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah, it was more of the producers on my film. They do a lot of documentary films. They had worked on 20 Feet from Stardom and
Hmm.
Searching for Sugarman, to name a few that felt like that got my attention.
Right.
I had a relationship with them, and they began to work out the dynamics of getting the rights and the excitement of the estate.
Yeah.
Once they got that, then they went to a short run of filmmakers to say, these are the filmmakers we feel would be great fits. Let's hear ideas from all of them. And that's what I was able to get. I got in through that door and then was pitching my ideas to Wayne Barrow, the manager,
Right.
and Miss Wallace. And then when they got excited about my take and my body of work, I was then brought to meet her and sit and chat with her. And that was just a classic experience for me.
Mm.
And to go show up at her house in New Jersey, the house her son bought for her before he died, the house he was going to live in.
Yeah.
To go sit with her, I kind of feel like she might be the most famous living mother. I can't think of another mother that has gained so much, notoriety and had such a big presence. So it was fun. We went to the Red Lobster, very nice lunch. She ordered a Bahama Mama, and we got to chatting, and certainly right out of the gates, it was right into her upbringing in Jamaica and how she took her son there every summer of his life. And that was revelatory to me. I was like, I can't believe this isn't real prominent in every story I've heard about him. And it was cool because it wasn't just us trying to be like, oh, he went to Jamaica, so that's why his music feels like it was more
Hmm.
just it was cool to understand the culture and the household he grew up in and what
Yeah.
who he was and the fabric of who he was. And that's the stuff that started to really be in sync with the pitch, because when you make a
Yeah.
pitch, it's like you're just pitching stuff. And then sometimes they really like it. And then you're like, oh, crud, like, what am I going to do here what am I going to put on screen,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was real cool for me, for my kind of lofty idea to be met with some great stories.
Mm. Well, I think you raise a good point because she is the star of this film, isn't she? I mean, in a way. I mean,
Yeah,
she is quite a character.
she is, without a doubt. I mean, she's a great storyteller and she's super animated. She's incredibly confident, which you've seen,
Hmm.
you saw leaving Jamaica at 16 to land in Brooklyn and
Right.
pull it off and then have a kid right away, and have a dad that just split as soon as, was married and in another relationship and was lying to her the whole time.
Mm.
She pulled through that. So her confidence is off the charts. And what's fun now is that she's gotten to, tell these stories a lot, some aspects. So there's also a confidence in her performance that's just insane to sit and chat with. The best part is like her stories when run against his best friends, they're miles apart. And that's what I started to see as one of the joys of the film, was that the mother's take and then what was really going on. And
Yeah.
that became a great dynamic in our film.
Well, there's a, I mean, spoiler alert, I guess, but we find out that she was throwing away some
Yeah,
of Biggie's drugs that she
I
thought was
know.
food that had gone
Yeah,
bad.
well,
Yeah.
what do you, there was so much innocence, again, she thought her kid, again, he was a very smart kid. She talks so much about that, about his talents. And so in the early years, he was an ace, he
Mm.
was he was the smartest and most charismatic kid in the class. But, you know, he was cooped up, you know, he was looking down on Brooklyn and wanting to get out and about, you know. He wanted to be like the kids that got to run around, and all they wanted to be is like him. You know, I wish
Yeah.
I had a mom that took care of me. So that became another interesting storyline, was just his desire to kind of get out and be a normal Brooklyn kid. And that was fun to play against, you know, kind of being raised by an immigrant mother. And
Yeah.
that was just a great arc in his story.
I mean, Brooklyn obviously plays large in his life and in this film, and I think that's quite a well main theme, and I think it works quite effectively. Is the I know this isn't going to sound exciting, but the use of the maps to show
Yeah.
how close everyone was and how small this world was that they
Yeah,
all
yeah.
lived in.
I agree. Those maps really, you know, again, you after 4 years of working, when you think about the detail and thought you put into every little bell and whistle on the film, you appreciate any feedback. Like, I love the maps. They were so simple, and I'm like, but it wasn't simple for us to get them right. And when we got them right, they really were effective storytellers. And everybody has asked me through talking about this film, you know, how'd you come up with it? And I'm like, I mean, it was easy. Like when I interviewed, you know, the producer, he would say, I live down 2 blocks, then you'd
Yeah.
go right, you go 1 block, and he would
Yeah.
give you these classic descriptions. And it laid itself out right for us of like, man, this is crazy. They're all like, at times, one of them lived on top of the other in a project,
Yeah.
you know, style of living, and he would just look out the window and the other dude would look up and he'd be like explaining it the same way. He lived 2 windows down, then I'd look to the right, and you know, that just became the classic aspect of our film. And what was cool is that these guys, you know, they're very private. This is a very dear, you know, this is their best friend, and
Yeah.
this story still stings to them to this day. So it was a long process to get them to open up to me the way they did.
Mm.
And that was probably the most difficult part of this, for me being so much of an outsider and coming in on something that had been mined over for 25 years. These people
Mm.
have been in a million things talking about this, and I bet you 2 of them turned out the way they hoped they would, or you know.
Mm.
And so I went into it with all that sort of, you know, kind of standoffishness. And you know, that's where I do well. I'm a very whatever, I I tell the truth. If I'm gonna do something and say I'm going to do it, I'm going to live up to it. And these are the types of films where I have to get everybody's trust, that I tend to do well with, as long as there's like we can get there at some point. If the access is truly there, I can usually get it, just because I'm you know, a good guy like that.
Yeah.
I'm not a sensationalist filmmaker. I want everybody on my side. If I'm going to make the
Yeah.
best film about your son and friend, you got to trust me. And if we
Right.
can't get there, then it's hopeless. So that was a process, but a super rewarding payoff in the end, because guys like D-Roc, who is
Right.
the other star of the film, that was a really long,
Mm.
that was probably the most complex journey I went on this film, is to get him to finally, you know, feel like this was the one to share his personal diaries with. And that was will be one of the best memories, is the, you know, kind of the friendship we built.
Mm. Well, that's
The
that's
odd
an
couple.
yeah. Well, uh, I won't ask which one's Felix and which one, but
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah, we're
but
both
yeah,
James is both in us.
the thing is that's an interesting point, because a lot of times the way, if I'm sure our listeners will know, a lot of times the way these sort of projects might have worked, and it's the way I kind of thought this might have worked. Someone said, "Oh, there's this never before seen footage. Let's hang a doc around it," right? Which
Yeah,
can or
nah.
cannot work. And often
Yeah,
it
yeah,
does,
for
you
sure.
know. But that's not. It's because you got to know D-Roc, and he said, "Well, by the way, did you know I have all this stuff we used to shoot, you know,
Yeah,
on tour?"
It was a little bit of both, in the sense of like, I knew this stuff existed because it was kind of coming up in the first conversations, and the
Yeah.
management, Wayne, who was a producer on the film, was like, this will be, we got to get him on
Right.
our
Right.
side, and so, it was funny, like that one, truthfully, as just a classic first story of making a film. I mean, one thing that I scored on early is my first trip on this film was to Jamaica. I went with Miss Wallace. Those were the things that I knew we would be getting. So I went and did that trip right out of the gates and got to sit with his grandmother, meet his uncle. It went so
Mm.
much deeper than I ever thought I could, achieve with that particular trip. So along the way, I posted a picture on my Instagram of me and Gwendolyn Wallace, his grandmother, and just said, "Man, what a cool experience.
Yeah.
We went on a hike together, and it was truthful. I was more just, what a incredible 97-year-old woman.
Yeah.
What do they got in the water here?" And he when I got back, we went to Brooklyn and we started to do the first set of interviews in Brooklyn. And D-Roc was going to be at the tail end of those interviews. So, kind of that came the day for it. I'm there, on documentaries of this size, it wasn't a huge budget. So every day of shooting really is important.
Mm.
And, I had a hot set, I had a great DP, I had everything. And D-Roc kind of finally shows up at the end of the day. And, basically just says to me right out the gates, like, "I'm here, but I'm not doing the interview." So I like,
Okay.
okay, all right, that's crazy, to me, like, dang, what am I, so how do I handle this? And of course, I was always, I'm not going to lose. That's one interview in this journey
Hmm.
that, it just, so I just like weirdly sat by like my crew that were like silhouetted in the lights we just turned off. And they were like awkwardly standing there. And we just proceeded to eat corn nuts and talk for 2 hours, And
Hmm.
he said, the first thing he said is, "Man, I know you're on the right path because I saw that picture of Big's grandma. And I can't believe you took the time to sit grandma down." And it let
Mm.
him know that we were on the path that he probably always felt everybody should be on, but nobody went through with it.
Mm.
And suddenly at the end, he kind of applauded me for not pressuring him to do an interview before he was ready for it.
Mm.
We then got the chance to really get to know each other, and then the lane was open. We built a friendship and we built a trust that got us through the whole process. And it was a lot for him to share this stuff. And the more I leaned on it as the film went on, the better the film got, and the more he came to life in our film. And that was
Mm.
kind of always my goal.
I guess that's a good point, and one I didn't really appreciate, I have to admit, when I watched was but you're telling their story as well, aren't you? Their
Yeah.
life, their childhood, their youth, because they
Hmm.
were all inextricably linked
Yeah.
with Biggie. And so this is very personal for all them too, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, it's personal in the ways that I also stated is they've been burned a bunch. They've been
Yeah.
part of things where maybe they didn't like the way they were presented, or whatever it is. There's been a variety of experiences, and a lot of it just like the personal interaction of whoever was doing it. Maybe
Mm.
didn't rub them right. But yeah, it was all there, and I needed their stories. I needed their faith. I needed their trust to dig deep, because I didn't want the story they told already, in that film. I wanted to kind of
Mm.
focus on another phase. And I think it took them a minute to, kind of get in the spirit of that, especially Puff. Luckily I got to do Puff last, and,
Mm.
and that was somebody that when he got to watch a lot of what I had edited, he realized that he was the dude that probably knew him the least in my cast of characters.
Yeah.
And he understood that the film was this personal
Mm.
testament to him and his friends in this group that he grew up in, these blocks in Brooklyn that were, so interwoven into this story. And so Puff even got that, he was able to see like, oh, okay, shit, this is like really the film about him. And I was like, yeah, that's right.
It's not about you. It's about,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it was cool to not have to we use him out of the gates in the film, but then he kind of drifts away, and
Mhm.
he comes in naturally when he came into his life, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that was, I think people appreciated that.
Hey, a quick question for you. Do you call him P. Diddy or Puff Daddy? What do you
I
call Sean
I mean, I called him
Combs?
Puff, but I mean, I called him Sean when I met him, because I too was like confused on which memo I had just got in, and I even know that he's called Love, calls himself Love, and
Yeah.
I think that's the most current name, and so I just went with Sean just because it was the only. I was kind of nervous, I just kind of whatever came out of my mouth, that's what it was, but I know it didn't, you know, uh, make him agitated. We carried on right away, so I felt like whatever I did at least kept the focus in the moment.
No, it's funny. I remember, yeah, I've always just wondered, not that I will ever run into
Yeah.
Sean P. Diddy Combs or whatever he's being called, but yeah, what do you call him?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it changes a lot, so I think he's got to be used to it by now. Maybe somebody didn't get the new iteration. He's got to be cool with that.
Exactly. Hey, well, I think maybe we'll give our listeners a bit of an early break here and let our sponsors
Great.
say a few things, and then we'll be right back with Emmett Malloy, director and producer of Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell. You're listening to Factual America. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Alamo Pictures to keep up to date with new releases or upcoming shows. Check out the show notes to learn more about the program, our guests, and the team behind the production. Now back to Factual America. Welcome back to Factual America. I'm here with director and producer Emmett Malloy. The film is the Netflix original documentary Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell, dropped in March. And we've been talking about telling the story of Biggie's life with a focus maybe where it hasn't been before, which is more I mean, he only lived 24 years, but the first 20 years of his life. So we find out interesting things, don't we? I mean, you took this trip to Jamaica, you meet his family, uncle who played a big part in his life, his grandmother, amazing woman. We find out that he had all kinds of influences in his life. Country music was in his life. It's there's a lot there, maybe much more than people realize.
Yeah, well, I thought so. I think that's what got me excited about the movie. I definitely didn't feel there was no new clue on his death or anything
Mm,
that I was like, had a singular, item that would just light people up, so I had to kind of go back and almost, try to just tell the seminal Biggie movie
hmm
for a Netflix audience that most have maybe heard of them or, know a song or two, but many didn't, just probably just know the name and probably just know Biggie Tupac,
Yeah,
so that was
yeah.
cool that I had to kind of be challenged with that, because that initially I was going to make this movie. It was called Christopher. I pitched it. That was always going to be the name of it, Christopher, just to
Mm,
kind of lead with the
right.
philosophy of the film. This is about the real guy, not
Yeah.
the stage persona. And as you kind of get going and you get into Netflix and their style and the analytics, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'll call it Biggie. Got it. Yeah, we'll go. No more. I'm not going to fight for this.
Well, we
I
had
would do.
the
Yeah,
I was just going to say we had the one of the directors from Murder Among the Mormons, and
yeah.
they had a different title as well, and Netflix as well. But if you name it Murder Among the Mormons, you're going to get a lot more views and hits. And he said, well, they just
Deal.
basically said, what font do you want it in? I mean, it was
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Mine was a teeny bit more romantic. They pandered to me a bit more. And in the end, it just made sense to call it. I just wanted to call it Biggie, and
yeah.
they seem to like colon something as well.
Mm,
So I again, we just each challenge like that, I just dug in and tried to make it a positive,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, if I'm changing it, I want to change it. I don't want to change for me. Let me just come up with a bunch of names and
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
see which one your marketing department feels best about. But let me at least keep the process in our court and present you guys ones, and then you pick, and that will feel better to me. but we evolved it from there. And yeah, you know, his life was filled with interesting things. I mean, from his neighbor that played jazz music, you know, played with all the greats, a saxophone player, Donald Harrison. You know,
Yeah.
when you sat and talked with him, you know, he started going into these stories about his, you know, him trying to groom him to be a jazz musician, him taking him to the modern art museums to see
Yeah.
Picasso and
Yeah.
Van Gogh. That blew my mind. I
Yeah.
was just like,
Yeah.
people are going to trip to know that Biggie went to art museums, you know? And again, these were things that my goal was to like present him as the artist he was, so people understand that
Mm.
greatness, it just doesn't, you know, it's people work at it. And this kid was a curious kid with a tremendous artistic gift. And, you know, when I got those stories out of Donald, I, I, I was doing this before interviewing them. So I started to be like, okay, dude, so if you listen to Max Roach with you, what
Exactly.
song, you know,
Yeah.
like I want to know the song and the detail. And then I was able to go into these interviews in a very advanced place where I was
Mm.
really narrowing in on the story I wanted to tell, because sometimes, you know, you just got to go there and find it all out. And
Mm.
these ones, I kind of, because of how many stories have been told, I kind of knew where I didn't want to go. So I
Yeah.
kept trying to find the country music story, you
Yeah.
know, where you were like, where people were going to be like, what? I had no idea he listened to country music. He didn't. His mom
Mom
did.
did.
It
Yeah,
was just
exactly.
on all the time. So
Yeah.
you take your thing. Yep. Country music's great storytelling. Oh,
Mm.
what? He had it on the house. I didn't say it. You did. You know, like I tried to do that with this film where
Yeah.
people didn't ever try to think we were being like, oh, because of that, this. We had no way to
Mm.
prove it. We could just light up the imagination and help people understand the soundtrack of his life.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, Donald Harrison straight out of Central Casting for a jazz musician. He's
Yeah.
great, and the Max Roach bit was excellent. I thought that was really interesting,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, I think. I mean, you know, I dusted off. Well, I didn't even dust off old CDs, though I do have them. I just got it
Yeah.
on Spotify, but you know, listen to some of the old album, you know, Ready to Die, you know, and yeah, it's interesting. It really it kind of gives a little perspective on that too, because there's one, I forget what it's called, but it's the one where he makes reference to his mother a few times.
Mhm.
I think I know where Eminem may have been inspired, but
Yeah,
I
totally.
think you know, it's got one of these reggae sort of I forget what that's
Yeah,
called.
dance hall.
Yeah,
Respect.
dance hall kind of stuff
Yeah.
going, and you've got a woman's voice singing and using the Jamaican slang and stuff.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, that's interesting. I hadn't really picked up on that before. You know, it's
Yeah.
and
That's what we and we tried to do it in the film by even showing like, you know, you know, his producer 50 Grand and Mr.
right.
C, when they're talking about mic presence and how the
Yes.
Jamaican DJs would have this mic presence, and they even say, I don't know if he knew it or not, but he got it from there. And it's
Mm,
the truth. When you went and sat his Uncle Dave down, they went and saw these things. I mean, he straight up said it. We'd sneak out, and then
yeah.
we go over in this little grass knoll and we just trade verses. And you know, he was a young kid then, and to know that was so cool. You know, it made you go, you know, even just for his musical prowess, it was cool. But I couldn't help noticing going around Jamaica, seeing Bob Marley murals everywhere, and then going straight to Brooklyn and
And
seeing Biggie murals everywhere. And even that tripped me out. You know, that
yeah.
too is nothing you can articulate in a film, but it was certainly with my own eyes going, man, these guys kind of impacted their hometown the same way. You know, they're kind of the face of
It's
Jamaica and
interesting.
Brooklyn now, and their phrases spread love. You know, it's like they've taken over the bumper sticker market, you know, like for those. And that's so interesting to me. I was fascinated by some of those things, just the power of their music.
That's no, that's very interesting. I mean, I think it was you were talking about mic presence. I mean, one thing I've told someone even today, I said, look, if I mean, watch for other reasons, but if for no other reason, watch this because I think that mic battle he has before he becomes famous
Yeah, it's
in
epic.
Brooklyn is absolutely amazing.
It really is. I mean, that was always the one, like every, that was the seminal Biggie clip, that
Yeah,
that everybody has. If you saw it, you'd just that'd be the one and only clip you would retain.
yeah,
And especially too for us, like I don't know what it is, but hip hop, the genre of hip hop music, I can't think of a lot of seminal live clips
mm,
that I've seen. It's the studio perfection that seems to really shine.
right,
Whereas like you go to punk and it's endless the amount of
mm,
times your mind's been blown by like a punk moment. And so that's what was so cool about that one. The vibe, the way it is on film is so incredible. And then obviously it's before he's fully formed, but the talent's totally there. But the best part is that's another thing where because of Miss Wallace and the access I had, we got beyond the little 3-minute YouTube clip that everybody's seen. We got the
yeah,
whole 40 minutes, and we were able to craft stories around the details of the day. And I think people, again, were excited to know more about this clip that maybe had already lit them up. But that clip, he just buries the guy. And,
yeah.
and I just love that the whole thing, his buddy's like, yo, I was just excited because I brought him there, and
Exactly.
everybody was like, "Yo, that's your friend,"
Yeah,
and it was just so cool to hear that because it was like, I mean, it's like a boxer lighting it up, and a thing, you
yeah,
just like the whole neighborhood's buzzing about it, and that
yeah.
that just brings you back to a more innocent phase of life.
Yes, indeed. I think, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, what comes out of this is he's the most, in some ways, most unlikeliest of rap stars, legends, given where he came
Truthfully,
from.
I mean, yeah, agreed. It's, even just the way he looked,
Yeah,
I mean, at that time, Puff talks about it was all about like being handsome and gloss lips and looking like LL Cool J.
yeah,
So for this guy to come out and with all this talent and be a sex symbol, like it's insane, it's just
exactly.
crazy. And it all goes back to like his vision, just the confidence that he gained once he was able to be that and not, side gig it. Once he was able to fully be it, he got to achieve his dreams and he knew what to do with it. And he did it. And then all those other things come because of your confidence. You got that. I mean, of course, girls are gonna, love you. You got, you're that guy. So again, that all came, but everybody always talks about how he was like a sex symbol, and that's certainly something I picked up more along the way, because he was
Yeah.
just so charming always. But it was fun to hear everybody fascinate on that. That was a cool part of this
Mm.
process.
I mean, you were talking about Netflix earlier. I mean, when was there ever any pressure to say, look, concentrate on more the East Coast, West Coast story, or or some of these. It could have even been a true crime doc, right? I mean,
Yeah,
or maybe there will be one. I don't know. Probably
yeah,
have been.
yeah. Yeah, well, I know that Nick Broomfield did one that kind of gets into that. I think the good thing is, we always pitched it as Christopher, and we were like
Right. Right.
real specific in the beginning, like, yo, this is what this film has to be about.
Yeah.
And we always envision it ending at the release of Ready to Die. They have a platinum party afterwards, and we kind of thought that was the place to go out in the film. That's how we always pitched it. Like that's kind of when you made it to your
Right.
dream level, before any of the downs of fame come in. That was always the way to go out, then when you make a film with Netflix, I was listening for things that could make this film good for them. And,
Right.
it got made clear that a lot of these people didn't even know much about them. And you kind of got to avoid, they have this philosophy. I don't think it's like a company philosophy, but it was brought up a few times, like, don't make them go to Wikipedia right after watching, you know? And I was like, that's a good way. That's a good roadmap for me to follow. You know, if I could just avoid you having to go to Wikipedia and give you enough of it
Yeah,
and let you
yeah.
understand it. So honestly, it made the back end of our film more satisfying to kind of be able to touch upon the second record. And we just
Mm,
had so many great soundbite moments, the grandmother, everything of just kind of like, you know, the road leading to his tragic death, that
mm.
it worked out well for us. And it was something that I'm very happy they, you know, recommended that and kept me open to that, because it would have been shallow minded to
Mm.
do it the way I was kind of being I thought I had to do it that way. Once I let go a little, it was a relief.
That's interesting. Do you think do you think it opens you up to a bit of criticism in the sense that because it almost, you go to that extra step, it then people are like, well, then why didn't you go into more
Yeah, I
detail
mean,
about his death
yes.
and East Coast, West Coast, and all these sort of
I,
conflicts and things?
I think one what worked for me is that people are sick of that part of this story. And the one thing I can
Yeah.
say clearly now, with month and change since the release of our film, that everybody picked up on what we were trying to do
Mm.
and viewed. I thought that would get a little more criticism.
Mm.
The reviews, the feedback, focus there. I think some people, the feedback was like, why do another darn Biggie movie? You know, it
Yeah.
was kind of
Yeah.
that negative stuff out of the gates. But for the most part, the people who watched it and you know, got into the positive spirit of it, I think appreciated us not going there. I always thought it was a little bit of our vulnerability when I, you know, kind
Mhm.
of also just even admitting the process.
Yeah.
It was a bit of an add-on, you know? And so you're always a little unsatisfied with those types of things, because you feel, you know, I mean, how long did we talk about this
Mm.
pitch and up to Ready to Die, and you have all those things. But like I said, in the end, I think we made the right call. And I think, you know, it feels like people were uh, enjoying the way we came about making this film. And I truly have never released something, you know, this is my biggest film that I've gotten to release, just as far as the platform,
Yeah.
but also the most positively received, you know, which sometimes it's not like that. You know, sometimes
Yeah.
you get your most popular thing and you maybe had to kind of do something to get it there that was a little out of your wheelhouse. And this
Mhm.
one, fortunately, it was just, I got to do it on a big enough story that you know, I was able to you know, get the benefit of that, and then got to make something that people, you know, enjoyed watching.
Okay. Well, I see they're back on your shelf, your Grammy. I
Oh
think
yeah, shit. That's hilarious.
conspicuously placed.
Yeah, that's more my style.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife keeps bringing that thing out, and I always hear that story about how Merle Haggard, like when somebody went to shoot him, he
Yeah.
used the Grammy as his doorstop.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's where those are my icons.
Oh, you didn't have to move the camera because I mentioned
Oh
it,
no,
but
I'm only kidding. I'm
yeah,
only
but
kidding.
no, but the reason I raise it is because you do have this. I mean, you've got this long filmology. You've done a lot of mostly music stuff.
Mhm.
Great stuff. You've done stuff with the White Stripes, Jack White, even the Black Eyed Peas, just to name a few.
Yeah,
Uh,
random. Throw the
yeah,
Black Eyed Peas in there, huh?
yeah. Well,
Jeez.
I can get, I like anyone else. I can either
Yeah,
get on Wikipedia or IMDb, but
yeah, yeah.
yeah, but I mean, where would you? I mean, you, and as you said, you came to this as not necessarily well, not necessarily a big hip hop or at least East Coast hip hop fan or something, but you are of this roughly, not even just roughly, you are the same age as Christopher Wallace and his friends, basically. I mean, what do you think Biggie's legacy is, or in terms of what he has meant for hip hop?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say. I mean, I think he's kind of an icon of the modern hip hop artist. You know, I do feel like in the film we kind of insinuate this, but it feels like the kind of hip hop mogul grew out of that
Mm,
brand, you know, guys who are real interested and smart businessmen interested in doing other things and getting into other ventures. I think he's a forefather to that, to Jay-Z, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I look at that, but I mean, I think, as far as like just that mic presence, I think he's just going to stand up to anybody as far
Mm,
as presence on the mic. And since that's such a massive part of that specific genre of music, I
mm,
just think he's always going to sit up there. Kind of like when you talk about basketball, you're going to
mm.
always have Michael Jordan, LeBron,
Right.
Kareem,
Right.
Bill Russell, Will
Yep.
Chamberlain. They're always the five are always going to be there. The 10. Some
Mm,
people will throw a Kobe in
right.
there or an Iverson, just to kind of mix it up.
Hmm.
And certainly LeBron's going to get a lot of like looks at number one.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Biggie's going to sit in that little dance for the rest of our run.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's a big, humongous legacy, And I also think he like put Brooklyn, the spirit of Brooklyn, worldwide. I think right now you could run anywhere in the world and
Mm.
be like, yo, is Brooklyn in the house? And somebody's gonna like throw a Biggie line at you. Uh, and that's a pretty massive legacy.
Yeah, and he also gave his nickname to a Supreme Court justice, if you will,
Yeah,
and
I
it's
know. How insane is that? So many of those things were going on. I mean, this guy gets inducted into the Hall of Fame in a, crummy year as far as COVID and
yeah,
presence. But, even in the time I was working on this film, cool things like that happen. The street he was raised on was named after him. He was inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I
amazing.
mean,
Yeah,
it's such a crazy legacy. And it just seems like this is a guy that everybody wants to continue to celebrate. And, there's a lot of big artists that were probably hitting record sales at a similar amount. And, we don't talk about them much. And
yeah,
their songs aren't getting dropped at every,
yeah,
bar mitzvah, wedding, and barbecue for the
yeah,
rest of time.
yeah. I think it is kind of the funny thing about rock and hip hop and this sort of type of music. It's what's cutting edge is, as you say, 20, 30 years later,
Yeah.
showing up at bar mitzvahs and
Yeah, it's insane. I
and
mean, especially when you now know the record and like what it was born out of and the
yeah,
stories that it was telling. But that, that just became the genre, and that's was, oftentimes the voice of these great,
mm,
talents that came from these, crazy neighborhoods, just challenging life stories, and they were able to, you know, bring it to life in a cinematic way as he
yeah.
did, where it just, you feel it.
And I think that's something we've obviously touched on, but I think we haven't gone into detail. But the film does, which is what Brooklyn was like in the '80s and early '90s, and what he was having to go through. Just what he saw on a daily basis every time he went down to Fulton Street. Right? I mean, that's quite. I guess maybe that's something that we too easily forget about what
Yeah.
things were like back then. Um,
Yeah, it was an intense thing, and you see the hardest of guys on in our film talking about how Fulton Street scared them,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
what was cool, not even cool, but what I tried to do in the film is like there were several moments that we point out in the film that one more day in a certain place
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
could have been in jail, and this whole thing could have been, you
Mm.
know, uh, amounted to nothing. We'd never even know of this of Christopher Wallace, and there was several of those in his life because again, he wasn't like romancing selling drugs. That was just his crew. That's what the
Mhm.
role models and the guys on the street like looking
Yeah.
the coolest and having all the stuff we're doing. And then of course he wanted to fit in and he wanted to make money, and he was a guy, he was a shrewd guy that
Yeah.
wanted to be a kingpin.
Yeah.
If he was going to do something, he wanted to kind of be really good at it. And that was the cool, interesting thing about that time is like the hustlers, the hip hop kids, they rapped about being hustlers, like they
Yeah.
were kind of aspiring to be hustlers. And now I think it's, not
Yeah.
like that anymore. But that was
No.
a romantic time where, you know, and I love the story we uncovered and got deeper into about his friend Oli
Yeah.
and his
Yeah.
death. And that was something we had to get by on with very little footage, just a few photos. But, you know, his best friend was killed, you know, on a night he should have been with them. And his
Yeah. Yeah.
family's ties to the drug game were insane. And those
Yeah.
stories, I had to find a way to get those into the film because I felt they would help people understand, um, you know, the ranks that he was running with. I mean, this was real stuff.
You know, I think that's a very good point because I think some of us at the time probably, you know, and it was kind of the nature of rap, heard the lyrics and never actually took them maybe sometimes
Mhm.
seriously. But they were actually not just inspired, they were based on real life in his, you know,
Yeah.
in his experience. So,
Yeah. I tried to show that in the movie, you know, because I
mhm,
think that's something I kept underplaying as a filmmaker. I'm like, man, we keep talking about how his lyrics were like the everyday struggle, but
mm,
I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it in how it's echoing our narrative.
yeah,
And that was something that weirdly took a long time for us to get that balance right, where you started to feel the songs and feel that they were, you know, kind of chapters of his life that he's bringing. And they
mhm,
were embellishments, you know. Obviously you see clearly he loved his mother and had
yeah,
the closest relationship ever.
exactly.
But if you listen to the record, you'd be, whoa, gosh, you know, you think there was a
Mm,
different narrative.
mm,
But I wanted to bring that storytelling to life. And, you know, I needed crutches like the country music thing to light the fire in the audience's
yeah,
mind to say, like, oh, country music, storytelling, storytelling. And then when I put the right song in the right place, it started to do a little more. And I'm used to that. I'm used to trying to make emotional films with like a band playing live music, and you
yeah,
got to somehow find it, and
yeah.
it's there. There's, even if it can be a little poetic or whatever, but there are ways that you can do it if the subject's letting you, and then that's something I'm always on the lookout for.
Okay. Well, speaking of which, and it's hard to believe, but I think we're coming close to the end of our time together. But
Told you I'd have no issue filling your time.
you
It's
haven't
like a
just filled time. It's
it's
been
like a
very much.
disorder. I just, like, I'm quiet, and then I give out these things, and I can't even let a question happen.
um, the I mean, what do you have next? What's next on the cards for you? Because
Um,
more music docs. What
yeah,
are you
well,
doing
I don't know. You know, that's the $1 million question right now, and I'm just working hard on trying to find that next thing. You know, I did a movie, a narrative film with Jennifer Garner called The Tribes of Palos Verdes prior to this.
Mm,
I really enjoyed the depth of that project and kind of getting into it with some great actors. So
mm,
I'm both looking at documentary films and with just, you know, um, kind of dusting off some old ideas and also
mm,
connecting with a couple personalities, living personalities, you know,
yeah.
because I think I'd like to do one more in the moment next. You know, that's the one thing I'd say after doing a long-winded project like this with an estate and kind of going through the act of kind of dealing with mostly archival and speaking about it. I
Mm,
kind of realized the next one, I'd love it to be, you know, maybe somebody on their last go around, somebody that I could
mm,
do something that felt more in the moment. That's the one thing I'd say I'd like to pivot on. But you never know. I'd be game. I finished a 5-hour series on the Dream Team, the basketball team, the
yeah.
92 Olympic basketball team that I did with the famous sports writer Jack McCallum, the Sports
Oh
Illustrated
wow.
writer, and that was real cool. And that's something I just had a blast. You know, got getting to talk to the people I got to on that film.
Yeah.
So
And where could someone see that? Because
that's done through Paramount, and it's trying to find, you know,
a
it's
home.
yeah, trying to find where it will come out around these Olympics. So I have, you know, just waiting to kind of see where they want to position it. But you never know with these things. There's so many platforms. Yet doing a project with the NBA, Michael Jordan, all these humongous personalities like this. It's just challenging. And at the end, you surrender. And just like this one, just hope it finds a good place in the end and people get to see it, because you really put a lot of work into them. But both of these have been, that one and this, I just was having so much fun talking to everybody.
Yeah.
So I loved aspects of it, but they both have been very long-winded, so they wear you out.
Okay, well that's so you just need a change of pace for until
Yeah.
you tackle one of those again. But
Yeah, maybe so. I just more like doing a movie, doing kind of a darker narrative excited me. It was
yeah.
fun to make it all up and lean on your instincts of reality and what you can do to make the
Mm.
thing feel very genuine. But it was cool. I just feel like I want a great script. That's the one thing I learned,
Mm.
not that script was cool. It had a lot of interest, but I felt like we were always improving the script while we were working on it. And,
Mm.
I just know there's scripts out there that are kind of like, you know, ready to roll. And I'd be excited to get one of those and, you know, kind of lift my just kind of going to places I didn't see myself going as a
Mm.
filmmaker. Because I think emotionally, when you get a bit older, you're just cool with that. You're not fighting things.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
willing to
yeah.
surrender if you feel trust in it, and I'm good with that.
Okay. Well, for our aspiring writers out there, Emmett Malloy is looking
Yeah,
for a
hook
great
me up.
script. So just
Totally.
we'll,
Thank
we
you.
will have your links in the show notes. So
Thank
they'll be able to
thank
figure
you
out how
for
to get a hold
picking
of your Instagram account or however that works.
thank you
Hey,
for picking up on that.
hey, well, and after we finish recording, I might have a question or two for you as well. But
Cool.
not that I'm an aspiring writer, but so just wanted to say thank you again to Emmett Malloy, the director and producer of Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell, streaming on Netflix, still doing quite well. Highly recommend that you check it out. If you have any questions regarding how you can become a documentary director and producer like Emmett Malloy or other roles in the industry, I recommend you check out careersinfilm.com to learn more about careers in the film industry. I want to give a shout out to our engineer, Freddie Besbrode, and the rest of the team at This Is Distorted Studios in Leeds, England. A big thanks to Nevena Paunovic, our podcast manager at Alamo Pictures, who ensures we continue getting such great guests like Emmett onto the show. And finally, a big thanks to our listeners. As always, we love to hear from you, so please keep sending us feedback and episode ideas, whether it is on YouTube, social media, or directly by email. And please remember to like us and share us with your friends and family wherever you happen to listen or watch podcasts. This is Factual America, signing off. You've been listening to Factual America. This podcast is produced by Alamo Pictures, specializing in documentaries, television, and shorts about the USA for international audiences. Head on down to the show notes for more information about today's episode, our guests, and the team behind the podcast. Subscribe to our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Alamo Pictures. Be the first to hear about new productions, festivals showing our films, and to connect with our team. Our homepage is alamopictures.co.uk.